Good morning, YouTube. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Welcome to Keith Opines. Today, Keith is going to talk to us about the Detective Comics character of King Faraday, who I believe was originally a pulp character from I Spy comic
Yeah.
title, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. But we're going to get into a little bit of details of that. We are, of course, with Keith of Pop Culture Minefield. And he is going to share with us the history of this awesome character and the various agencies that he is associated with. So, Keith, what what should people who don't know about the character of King Faraday know first, right off the bat?
First and foremost, I think he was one of the prototype characters for James Bond. And I think he predates James Bond by quite a few years. Uh, he was created by Robert Kanger and Carmine Infantino. Carmine Infantino was one of the giants of DC Comics, and this guy was part of a whole trend in the 1950s to update a lot of the characters, pre 1950s DC characters, to make them more palatable to the audiences that they had going forward. Green Lantern, the Flash are two of the ones that got a complete character makeover in going from what they were in the 1940s to what we eventually now know them as. Okay, Alan Scott, Green Lantern, became Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. And they built the whole thing about the Guardians and the rings and John Stewart, and all of that came from Carmine Infantino helping to helping to basically change what they are. And the same thing with the Flash. Okay, the Flash eventually became rather than just a hero that was zooming around and saving people. They reformatted the character to make him a police scientist who had a girlfriend and all that other stuff, and making the two of them friends, and it's just great stuff. But I mean, King Faraday, to get back to that,
Mhm.
was part of what DC Comics kind of did since the very beginning, which is outside of just superhero comics, they would publish other things, westerns, romances, and other things. And this originally was a throwback to that kind of an idea, which is creating characters outside of just superhero characters. So,
So yeah, in my understanding, with because I'm cursory familiar with King
mm-hmm,
Faraday. I've seen him in more recent stories. I know a little bit about him from some older stuff,
mm-hmm,
but he is a spy, and from
mm-hmm,
some of his earlier incarnations, he was part of more of like a pulp style adventure.
mm-hmm.
So what can you give us about that, just to get our feet a little bit more wet in the history of King Faraday?
King Faraday, his first book was Danger Trail. Okay, and it was meant to kind of be this whole kind of pre Mission Impossible, pre James Bond, worldwide adventure, delving into the adventures of a lot of delving into the background of what was really going on with the kinds of cases and things. They would mix a lot of bulldog drama. Man, I can't talk today. Bulldog Drummond type adventure type stuff, but done in the sort of world of the spies. King Faraday was really a master, was is a master fighter, kind of a detective. So good that I think he was one of the trainers of Dick Grayson. Dick Grayson trained under him for a little bit. So it wasn't just Bruce Wayne. He also received a little bit of training from King Faraday. For a while, it was written that King Faraday had a dislike of superheroes, major distrust of them, and only had a begrudging respect for Batman. And they would eventually write it to where, as he gained more within comics and different writers wanting to use him, that softened over time. He's still not all that friendly with with superheroes in general, but he does have those that he kind of respects, and at the top of that list is Dick Grayson. He thinks Dick Grayson's a natural operative, which he did become for a while. Anyway, but those adventures of Danger Trail were eventually reprinted in the 60s. I think it was under the title I Spy.
Mhm.
And he is a member of the Central Bureau of Intelligence. And that one organization is a part of eventually a web of different types of organizations within the DC universe that he would have become a part of. At one point, I think it was Nightshade was a member, Bronze Tiger. They would both eventually be recruited into Task Force X, and on and on and on and on.
Mhm.
But eventually, he became a member. King Faraday became a member of Checkmate, and he served as the bishop to the White Queen, which was Amanda Waller.
That's in the Greg Rucka storyline, right?
Hmm. And
So,
that has
mhm.
also changed over time, that relationship. So
Okay, great. So before we get into the cool checkmate stuff, because that is a fascinating part of King Faraday's history, how would you compare King Faraday's role as kind of like a spy and this type of, I guess, protean-like agent that just finds himself in various different agencies through the bureaucracy, compared to, say, spies like James Bond or spies like the guys from Man from Uncle and things of that genre? Is there overlap, or is there enough distinction that King Faraday is his own?
there's a little bit of overlap, but it's about as distinct as you could because you're talking a world of superheroes.
Hmm.
Uh, the thing that DC Comics and even Marvel kind of does also is that the world as we know it is a different kind of world. There is this over there's this over reliance on just superheroes and thinking, hey, the world is this way and everybody's having fun because you've got all these heroes. But if you think about it, underneath all of that is this, counterintelligence would still be the same. Actually, it'd even be more dangerous because there'd be more of a need to have people that could carry out dangerous missions, even in a world of super powered people. Okay? But it's religious organizations, secret societies. King Faraday is able to navigate through all that stuff. There's stuff that even James Bond probably would not do that King Faraday does. And he's just this fearless guy that goes into it because it's his job.
Well, that shows a great type of potential for future stories of him. The one spy that will get themselves as dirty as possible for to
Mm-hmm.
achieve the job. Um, so Checkmate comes much later in King Faraday's career. Pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's in the late '80s, early '90s. There was the first Checkmate book, I think,
Yes.
where it didn't have the massive infrastructure that it has later in the early 2000s. But what was King Faraday's, if any's, involvement in the first series of Checkmate? Because that did have Amanda Waller. It had the knight who was a guy something Washington, if I remember correctly. Um, and it
Oh,
was
oh,
oh
go
yeah,
ahead.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, no. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was just an earlier type of series, just establishing the bureaucracy of it and the code of conduct. Because the Greg Rucka Checkmate is a response to that version of it failing, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
and I think
It.
that's also a fascinating story. Is like, okay, so what is Checkmate first, and then we'll get into the details of it later. Because Checkmate, look to me, looks like it's a parallel agency to Task
It
Force
is.
X. So if you
It
want to
is.
elaborate on that for us, for
It
all
is.
us fans.
Checkmate is more of the official government spy version of what Task Force X is. If Task Force X is the bad guy version, Checkmate is the good guy version. They're both operating though on behalf of our government, okay? And whereas Task Force X is the ultimate group for someone like Amanda Waller, who the people who participate in that are expendable. She can send them on any missions necessary, no matter how dangerous, because they're all expendable. versus, say, Checkmate, where it's more of a organization that's meant to basically do the impossible. The system within Checkmate is all based on chess. So you have the king, the queen, knights, pawns. That's how it's structured. Whereas, say, like with James Bond, the ultimate agents within MI6 are given 00 numbers.
Hmm.
Okay? So to depict who is there and your importance, it depends on who you're working with. You have your again, black versus white, with Amanda Waller being the White Queen and King Faraday being her bishop. And that role is usually one more of a not quite advisory, but it's definitely someone with a lot of experience and that has almost the ear sometimes of the person that is over them. In this case, the White Queen. Think Cardinal Rochu from Three Musketeers.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah. If you're familiar with that book. Um, so what we have here is an interesting dichotomy. We have Checkmate, which is basically the public official government agency that does still work in secret, but deals with more international relationships. And then you have Task Force X, the Suicide Squad, which is in the background and sort of manipulates situations that Checkmate could probably exploit. Like that seems to be the type of relationship that these two
Yeah.
agencies have,
with,
and
with,
that
with the understanding, though, that Task Force X are completely expendable.
yes. So if they needed to sort of put a foreign country that they're having some minor disputes with into a compromising position, they would use Task Force X to achieve that, and then they would send Checkmate in to sort of seal the deal, so to speak, on the
Mm-hmm.
public side of things. So, I
There you
mean,
go.
we have some really great government corruption story
Mm.
angles to explore here through the lens of King Faraday.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of stuff with regards to the compromising politics of it between other countries' perspectives on superheroes, on superpower characters, and
Mm-hmm.
then on their normal ambitions and what you know each of those parties want. And then you have pretty much King Faraday, who's advising Amanda Waller, who's probably one of DC's most pernicious villains, because she's not a good person despite the intentions that she has. She is the definition of uh, the path road to hell paved with good intentions, um,
Yes.
type of thing. So what is that type of relationship when with regards to King Faraday? Like if he's the advisor, kind of the supervisor, maybe the conscience of the White Queen.
Yes.
What situations do we find King Faraday in that version of Checkmate when we have this type of hierarchy?
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't last that long. In the Greg Rucka version, I think King Faraday only stays within that position for a few issues, and then he's gone. Uh, Amanda Waller is about as she is definitely in it. She's not someone. Let's just say in the afterlife, there's a definite direction and place where she's gonna go, and she's good with it.
Hmm.
That's what should scare anyone. This is a woman who is good with her decisions. Uh, she needs someone like a King Faraday, an agent who has actually been different places and done different things. Whereas Waller's whole thing has always been in the office. She is more of an office warrior. She knows how to navigate behind the scenes and has ascended to power through political means and other means within an office. Whereas King Faraday has had to do that and proven himself many times in actual missions. Okay? So she needs King Faraday, his way of viewing things, to provide a different perspective. More often than not, though, what Faraday realizes is that, for the most part, it's next to impossible to change Waller's mind. Once she has truly made up her mind to do something, she's clear. She's gonna do it. Uh, I think Faraday became fed up with that. because in his mind he wasn't really doing much of anything. I mean, stopping her just meant adding an extra 5 to 10 minutes to any consideration of a official decision she was about to make, and it wouldn't change that much. So
So that shows an interesting aspect for a character such as a spy like King Faraday is, which is he has something of a moral guiding post, so to speak. Um,
yeah, because his
we
career started before there were any superheroes. You also have to think about it that way.
Mhm.
The world is one way when you start doing what you're really good at, and then it becomes something completely different. Think about it from a spy perspective and how that throws everything off. If Superman actually existed in our world right now, that would throw everything off, including the world of spies. And depending on where if you were able to identify what country he's from, that would change everything. Every
yes,
country would
essentially,
be after you.
it would essentially be like a newer version of an arms race.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this foreign person's loyalties lie? Um, are they going to try and abuse their power and influence people? If they are, what tactics can we take to try and control that? And if one country can control that, will they be using it for um, you know dictatorship like reasons of spreading
Well,
and corruption? Or
I know you're not the biggest fan of the movie Man of Steel, but that also helps to explain the end of the movie with the satellites. I
Mhm.
mean, what is going on with the satellites and trying to follow him? That's a very important thing. And it's amazing that you don't have more than one trying to do that. You know, it wouldn't just be one particular general. It would probably be every rogue nation out there.
Anything
Every
that can
even
make a satellite or a drone would be looking to try and localize this character, which I don't disagree with as a good idea.
mhm.
I mean, Man of Steel has a number of interesting ideas there. I just don't find the execution to be very natural to
Yeah.
this type of character.
Yeah.
Like because the philosophical discussions, the government implications, the military implications, the populist implications are all fascinating aspects to explore with a character like Superman. The the irony to it is that because Superman is a salt of the earth, good-hearted person who does more about whose actions are more regarding rescues than they are about stopping supervillains, he earns the trust of the people to the point where they're like, hey, you know what? It's in our best interest to not have to be so surveillance of him, not have to be so paranoid about him and have him under constant surveillance. Uh, because so long as he never, turns bad, we're okay. But in the event that he turns bad, we should be prepared, and we should do that probably as discreetly as possible because of all of the senses that he's able to, exercise.
hmm and then you have people like King Faraday who are probably just thinking to themselves, it's a good thing he's not all about in our business and spying and all of that, because he would really throw everything into almost complete chaos. Even if he were doing the right thing, it throws everything into chaos, because whatever country he would claim any kind of allegiance to, that country then would become the target even from their friends to immense interest, spying, whatever. I mean, it would just get bad real quick.
Absolutely, especially if there was corruption in any of those agencies where they were doing something like, say, spying on their own citizens. If that got wind to Superman, he might do something about that, or he might
hmm
explore it. But I mean, that's why we also have his identity of Clark Kent, where he would just reveal it through journalism,
hmm
and you'd have this very, very funny dichotomy where the spy agencies are trying to kill Clark Kent, but they can't do it, and they don't know why. But he keeps on reporting on all the stuff that is essentially against the interests and the law of the United States.
And
Um,
that's
so.
what.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, so what I was going to ask is like, well, let's talk about some of the adventures that King Faraday had in Danger Trail, and then with some of the I Spy republications before we get into Checkmate as well, because Greg Rucka doesn't really explore much with him on Checkmate. Checkmate's really more about that Sasha character, which was Bruce Wayne's bodyguard, who's I think the Black Queen in that, and it's really about the political changes of between China and the United States, and a love story between Sasha and Mr. Terrific. as well. So there's a lot of
Wow.
things that are just not really King Faraday centric in that. So I wanted to focus a bit more on him because once I think we get a better understanding, at least for our audience, gets a better understanding of who King Faraday is with a couple of sample adventures, maybe even talking a little bit into The New Frontier by Darwin Cook, we can then explore what is the potential of this character on the television and film side of things.
His adventures are the kinds of adventures that you would expect a little bit from someone being a spy centric comic. Okay? Personally, I found the new version of Danger Trail not to be as good. It was better drawn, but the stories were boring. I mean, and it takes a lot from more modern day entertainment versions of spy characters by trying to weave this entire story through all these issues. And they lost me at least by issue 2. And
Wow.
that's not good. I mean, but there's, again, you keep, I agree, the story potential for this character is immense. Now, um, given when Danger Trail was written, I mean, again, there weren't any James Bond films, so it's essentially more or less like detective fiction dressed up as international intrigue, and that's pretty much the types of stories that you had in the Danger Trail. Being King Faraday, being a spy, the romances, the different types of villains. It's all basically what we had going on in the 1950s with those types of characters. Okay, Sam Spade. Basically, it's international Sam Spade. You know, Mickey Spillane, stuff like that. Uh, when we get into uh, in reviving the character and having them come forward within DC Comics, he basically becomes whatever the writers need him to be over the years. They didn't spend that much time going into his personal life. But when you get to New Frontier, okay, Darwin Cook's version of the character, I'd say that King Faraday is kind of like Batman. That's part of the reason why there's a begrudging respect. King Faraday really is kind of like Batman Bruce Wayne in that he is a really good detective. He can figure things out. That's part of the reason why he's able to stay alive so long. He is a man of a certain age, and spies don't really make good retirees because a lot of them never really lived that long. But with New Frontier, what Darwin Cook did with the character and integrating them into that story was amazing. In having him follow all the clues and eventually, spoiler alert, figuring out who Martian Manhunter was.
And that all comes from basically the mystery of how did this scientist pass away.
Mm-hmm. And so, in that respect, look, if you were to boil James Bond down, that's exactly who James Bond is. He's a detective. He has to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with what DC Comics and King Faraday were able to do is they were able to create an American version of that character, although that predated that character. Okay, so if you're looking for something new, if you're wanting to invent something new and try spies and other things, King Faraday is a really good entry level character into that world. Because again, as I said, you have spies, but you also have industrial espionage. You have a whole lot of cults and a whole lot of maniacal corporations, which basically are like your future Bondian villains. You know, this is all outside of the superhero, supernatural universe that you have within DC Comics. And this is where my criticism, not only of DC, but really of Marvel, has lain. Phase 4 should have been a lot of that stuff. That's what Phase 4 should have been for the MCU because they have all these secret societies and really Shang-Chi is in my opinion kind of like a more down to earth version of King Faraday. Except they turned him into a superhero, which in my mind doesn't make any sense. You've compromised a really cool character and turning him into a superhero rather than into a guy who just happens to have incredible fighting ability, who really is on a one-man mission versus his own father. Kind of like Luke Skywalker without the aid of the rebellion going up against Darth Vader.
Hmm. So then we're looking at a lot of intimate stories here and intimate missions as a potential for a character like King Faraday. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing that keeps coming to my mind when I think about this character, and it may be a little off for some of the audience, but I highly recommend that they do the research on it, which is Dan Briggs or James Phelps from the Mission Impossible series. He's the experienced type of well veteran spy who's made it this far to the point where now he's leading a younger team, but is still involved intimately with the missions, and it's just one mission at a time, one interest to take care of. What is the infrastructure of that point? And I think that's kind of like a great parallel to have in contrast with the fantastical stories of superheroes, because one of the things that you mentioned earlier with regards to DC is that they do have other genres. You've got some of the spy stuff with King Faraday. You have the Jonah Hex stuff for westerns. You've
Mm-hmm.
got your noir and detective stuff with Batman. You've got your adventure and romance with Superman. You've got your sci-fi and detective work with Green Lantern Corps. There's a lot of avenues to explore here. So on the spy side of things, with regards to King Faraday, what do we know with regards to his family and some of the other characters that he interacts with that he would probably consider friends or close allies? Because I do know that there is the joke he was named king by his father as a joke because it's like
Yeah.
king for a day. So by him, it's going to be king for a lifetime.
Hey, that's an interesting name of a movie. Hmm. Look, you're right. You have again, everybody knows about Amanda Waller, and to me, that would be a relationship that would be kind of sad in a way. To me, I like the original version of their relationship where he actually trained her with all of the bad stuff that she brought in from her personal life. Although now that's been undone, and she's more of his boss now. Um, I'd say some of the uh, members of the Suicide Squad, Bronze Tiger, and what was the guy's name? Richard Dragon also are two people that King Faraday has operated with and become sort of kind of friendly to. Um, Richard Dragon, especially, and Bronze Tiger. You can watch those guys in a new animated Batman film called, not new, but it came out last year. I'm getting old. But
Was that the '70s style Batman
yeah, yeah, they
cartoon?
put a lot of that in there and cross reference that uh, with Batman and the basically with Batman and the what's the name of that organization?
Was it the Cobras?
Not just the, yeah, but the Cobras, but also with Damien's mom,
Oh,
um,
the League of Shadows and
League of Shadows. They cross referenced all of that together in that one film, and I have to say personally, good job. That was a very well done story. Um, let's see. I would also get into let's see. Man, what would be another one? Um, and I'm blanking. I had a heck of
Well,
a
that's
night.
okay. Like you did mention that King Faraday helped in the training of Robin Dick Grayson. So what sort of do you have like
Well,
issue numbers
well,
or sub
well.
stories that we could discuss on that?
Oh, geez. I'd have to look that up, but he did.
Yep.
This is all pre New 52. But
Hmm.
one of the things that you learned about King Faraday is that it used to be that whenever, in the late 80s, early 90s, whenever Dick Grayson was having a problem with Bruce, one of the people that he would turn to for advice would be King Faraday. Because Faraday was pushing hard for Dick to become an agent. And he would often tell the kid, you have skills. Of course he's got skills. Look who trained him.
Hmm.
But but he that I think that's part of the reason why during the run of Nightwing a couple years back when Dick Grayson either died or had his whole thing revealed, he became an agent for a while They turned him into a spy for about a year in DC Comics. And so there's a whole run of Nightwing where it's just Dick Grayson as a spy, and he was really good at it, like King Faraday said he would be. Um, the potential for how Faraday can become useful within really DC Comics as a whole is wide open. The number of younger agents and those who, like Dick Grayson, have really almost perfect skills. Anyone who would want to stop being a superhero, I think King Faraday is the type of person that keeps close enough ties on these people to approach them and say, "Hey, I know you want to stop leading this, costume life. I can offer you something where you're serving your country and you can still help people and not really have to worry about world-ending apocalypses. Just something that'll stop the United States or the free world from falling under the boot or heel or whatever bad guy or bad country you want to name."
That's a funny speech because that very end part of it is totally a world-ending situation. So what you kind of did like an interesting parallel there to what we saw in the the cinematic side of like Nick Fury, where he was approaching, Iron Man, Captain America. You had Natasha and Clint
Well,
in his back
well,
pocket already.
the thing about when they did the whole Ultimate thing at Marvel, in reconceiving Nick Fury and the way that Shield worked, yeah, I think they based a lot of it on a version of Nick Fury that was sort of a combination of Amanda Waller and King Faraday. That's where I think that version of Nick Fury comes from.
Oh, cool. All right. So, so now that we've kind of like basically established the fact that King Faraday, he's a very kind of like a minor character in the overall pantheon of the Detective Comic series. He's had a number of issues over the decades, but he hasn't been as fully explored to the full potential that he could. The closest being with the I think it's like the C plot of Darwin Cook's New Frontier
Mm-hmm.
and the first handful of issues of Greg Rucka's Checkmate.
There you go.
So, I mean, it seems like it's almost a disservice to a character that is very potential because what you do have here is you have something that you can play around with the history of a few other characters. There's the character of Alfred Pennyworth, who has been retconned a number of times, who was a spy, isn't a spy, part of the SAS, not of the SAS. But regardless of either way, he's in a community that is comparable to King Faraday.
And so is his daughter. That's
And his
the other
daughter,
part
yeah.
of his. Yeah. That's
Because
the
his
other
mother
part of
was
the story.
Her mother was a French spy, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Part of the
Okay.
resistance.
So we have that aspect there. So what would be a great advantage, either for maybe a new comic book title of the character or a film or television version, that you would say, where's the starting point for this character to really get people on who aren't familiar with the comics involved in him? Like, what would be
I
an
would
interesting plot?
I I would call it Secrets of the DC Universe, starring King Faraday. And he is the type of person that, even though he doesn't operate with the heroes, he's got a line on pretty much everybody. Again, like what Batman had established with this whole thing about being able to get rid of members of the Justice League should anything, happen, they go rogue or something. I think King Faraday has at least basic information and understanding of a lot of these heroes and who they are. He knows where I shouldn't say he knows where all the bodies are buried. I think he knows where a lot of the important bodies are buried. He knows how to get to everyone. And I think he's the type of character whom could lead a version of his own version of not quite the Suicide Squad, but more like Checkmate of former heroes, and get the best out of them. Like Dial H for Hero. I've never really been the biggest fan of that particular title, but someone who has the ability to be able to change their power set every time they use a device, you could learn how to use them properly as part of your group. Maybe as an emergency, in case of emergency, break class, use this person type thing.
Hmm.
But then you have someone like, say, um, like say Speedy, Green Arrow's sidekick, who actually has some sort of experience. Uh, 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 his thing, I would use definitely former members of the Teen Titans who you don't hear from anymore. You know, Bumblebee is a really cool character, and I keep telling people, you're Hollywood, you're sleeping on a really cool character, especially Warner Brothers. That character, her story is amazing, and if you want to have a character of color who is smart and who is fun, that character is the character that you choose next. Not trying to do something with Batgirl like they've unfortunately done. That doesn't work, you know. um, if you could also go with uh, uh, I say taking other characters that haven't been used up to now. I was thinking that when they had announced the Suicide Squad, that we were finally going to have someone like Idris Elba play Bronze Tiger,
Hmm.
and they didn't do that. So Bronze Tiger is a character still out there. You could use that character and tell some new stories, and bring back Richard Dragon, bring back even you could even do a side story or two with someone like Slade Wilson. While he is still a contract killer, is who he is. He's an assassin.
Hmm.
He's not so much of a world-ending villain. He's a guy for hire, and I think there might be some sort of a background thing between him and King Faraday. I would think that Faraday would know who he was, because any good agent, especially if you work for any agency, you've got to know who a lot of gray, the people in gray within your world are. And assassins are people in gray.
So yeah, you
Again.
got Deathstroke the Terminator, Slade
Mm-hmm.
Wilson.
Yep.
You did kind of hint on something that would be really kind of fun, and that would be King Faraday leading a team that's his entire operation is just to thwart the League of Shadows
Mm-hmm.
operations as well. So it'd be a kind of a tug of war between him and Ra's al Ghul, whether
Mm-hmm.
or not he knows of Ra's al Ghul's existence. But regardless of that factor, it's basically, oh, here's a veteran spy who's recruiting a bunch of these sort of underused characters to thwart various plots that are being discovered through intelligence that are linked to the League of Shadows. That would be an interesting dynamic for either a mini series or a couple of feature films, because you get to sort of address the nature of kind of like spy versus ninja, so to speak.
Well,
But
yeah.
you're not hitting on to the grandiose nature of the superheroes itself. It's all like the covert, the discretion, to make sure that these events go down without anyone in the public being able to know about them. And it's because it's being done on either side, it creates a lot of potential tension there, kind of like the old days of Mission Impossible, where it's not about the big escape, or it's not about the explosions, the fights, and whatnot. It's about, can we get away without anyone realizing that we pulled this off? And
That's
that's a
it.
great type of tension, and that seems to be like the potential that you have with spy characters, that be a little bit against the grain from what we saw with Man from Uncle and James Bond franchise, because every James Bond ends with a very big climactic kind of fight where you have soldiers kind of storming the bad guy's base, things are blowing up all around, and Bond is trying to disarm the weapons or what have
Mm-hmm.
you. um, and unfortunately, that type of stuff has also gone on to the film side of things with Mission Impossible. But now we would have something where we could say, okay, this would be an interesting, low budget espionage type of show where both parties, at odds with each other, are trying to make sure that whatever they're doing, nobody in the public knows about it, because there's more advantage to them, like, manipulating uh, the flow of the river by just moving like a foot down by it and then moving the dirt over an inch in, and then moving another foot and moving it an inch in, and slowly over the course of several years that river is going to flow to a different town because of those types of movements. And that would be a very interesting type of genre to explore with a very underused character such as King Faraday.
Mm-hmm. And again, there are all kinds of characters that could be useful. I like the idea of the human target. I think Christopher Chance and King Faraday have run across each other a few times, and again, Faraday pretty much I think has been around a lot longer than a lot of these other characters that have come after him. So I think there's a wide group of characters in many different genres who would look up to, if they knew of his existence, King Faraday, and acquiesce to his experience. Christopher Chance is a really good character to use with that. Uh, I would also consider, say, someone like Doctor Midnight, who has yet to, I think, even make their appearance live action in any of the films. I'd
No, I
like to
think
see,
he's only been shown on the Stargirl series.
yeah, well,
And then the other one, of course, be Ted Grant, who him and Faraday are pretty much close in age. Um,
yes, and he
that's
would be
Wildcat.
useful as far as helping to train them. So if you happen to be like, for instance, Bumblebee is a character who's very very smart, but she has no real not street sense, but she can't fight very well, which is what made her boyfriend, i.e., husband now, so important to her story. But if you could teach her how to fight, how to defend herself, that makes her a character pretty much on par with even Tony Stark in that particular sense. For this group, you would need someone supplying. If you really wanted to take it off the books, you would need someone to help supply a lot of equipment, and that's where the Ted Cord character would come in. I would have, because Ted Cord is interested really in being, say, the anti Tony Stark. He is a nice guy. He is a guy who is really trying to change the world in the right way. And I know that there are certain people out there that like to see Ted Cord in his more comedy vein
Hmm.
and teamed
With
up
Booster Gold.
with Booster Gold. But the real Ted Cord is someone who's interested in really changing the world in a positive way. And I could see him helping to at least provide some equipment towards this particular endeavor
I could
and
also see
helping
him
out.
having a lot of conflicts with Faraday, because Faraday has this mission that might be a little controversial, and then you have Ted Cord who's like the moral compass that's in a slightly different direction, saying, "Well, no, we shouldn't be doing it." So, I mean, that's the other part too: is how much drama can we mine out of the characters in the dynamic if we're kind of building this sort of show or property with
Hmm.
King Faraday as basically your mission control leader,
Yes.
who is training a bunch of young people. You've got Wildcat, Ted Grant training them on the physical side of things. You got Ted Cord providing some of the equipment. You got Bumblebee maybe being like the potential team leader in the field, so to
Yeah, and
speak.
then you can use someone like Christopher Chance to teach them how to be better at sort of fading into the background because his major skill is being undetectable. You know, being someone who is operating in plain sight but undetectable to those who are looking. You know, he knows how to do that, and I've always liked that character. Human Target was always a character that I thought had much greater potential than they were being allowed. And again, with a lot of these characters, if you could take advantage of the fact of their training and who they are, that some of them would know each other, you're creating this really cool behind the scenes history and dynamic between all of the major players that are part of the clandestine portion of the DC universe. So,
Which
it,
is pretty fascinating. So now, so basically, let's take a look at the chess pieces with regards to Checkmate with this subject we're talking about. So we have
yeah.
Faraday, we have his teams. You have one of the adversaries being the League of Shadows. The
Mm-hmm.
next one would be is a one that's been used sparsely in comparison, which would be the Cult of the Cobra.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're basically just want to take over the world and turn people into
Well,
snake hybrids in some stories.
they would exist, say, like here, but between those two, you would have Brother Blood
Hmm.
and his cult. I mean, those guys are scary, but they're not as bad as Cobra because Cobra has an active thing about, as you said, taking over the world. Blood operates between there. He doesn't really so much want the world. He wants all the people to follow him and thus to gain the world. You know, he gets a kind of some of his power also comes from having as many fanatical people pray to him as possible. You know, I think that aspect from the animated movie that they did, they kind of combined Brother Blood a little bit with the Cult of the Cobra in that sense.
Hmm.
But that's always been Brother Blood's big thing. Um, and then you have what's his name? Geez, this morning, gosh.
That's okay. It's early for
There's
everybody.
one major villain within the DC universe who I think is the most dangerous person, and that is he's the one that's lived the longest,
Oh,
and
Vandal
that's
Savage.
Vandal Savage. To me, is the most dangerous individual because of him. I think a lot of what we now would consider to be some of the most interesting plot lines and threads within the entire DC universe are because of him. You know, you don't have a League of Shadows or Atlantis without him. What you realize is that he's been around so long, he's been sowing the seeds of changing civilizations. That's how he operates. So, this past season's Young Justice did right by that character and showing a lot of that stuff. Uh, uh, this is a character who is really operating on a level so much above even where even Lex Luthor thinks he's operating. You know, he is literally using everything and everyone as massive pieces on a gigantic chessboard. And the best thing for the universe is the fact that he only operates here on Earth.
Well, he's got to conquer one planet before he can go after others, right?
That's right. But he's a really good, to me, he would be the ultimate person for King Faraday to go against because he's that big. He's huge.
Hmm.
To the point of it almost being unfathomable to someone like King Faraday. You know, I would use him as a big bad. If you were going to end the series, I would use him as the ultimate big bad.
The
You
ultimate big
know,
bad that if Faraday manages to win, he basically stymies Vandal Savage's plans for a generation or so.
yeah, yeah, because again, when you have someone like Ra's al Ghul, there's a distinct possibility. I think that Ra's al Ghul might actually be one of Vandal Savage's kids.
Wow. And so he doesn't have them. He didn't get the blessed with the immortality gene, but he's able to survive the Lazarus pit.
I think that's part of the reason why he's able to survive the Lazarus pit, why it works a particular way on him.
Hmm.
You know, I think he's fathered a lot of different
Well,
people
for a
within
man
the
who's been
DC.
around as long as he have, he probably. I mean, what's one of the stories that they had there where he was essentially Genghis Khan for?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
And again, this is I could initially the idea for a movie like Joker is amazing, but you know what? You could have spent that same amount of money doing a Vandal Savage movie.
yeah, I would also say that some of the well, because you brought up Shang-Chi with regards to Richard Dragon and what King Faraday can do. The origin with regards to his father is very Vandal Savage-ish to a degree. He finds an alien or some sort of foreign of Earth item that grants him immortality, and then he ends up becoming a conqueror of nations. And then at some point, he loses some control there and finds control in the background
Mm-hmm.
areas of things. So there's an interesting overlap there.
Yes.
But in regards to like King Faraday, what are the type of tools that we can have fun with that he likes to employ in his missions? And if you have like photos or reference books or anything on hand, please feel free to show us
Okay.
that because I
The
I
way
can bring those up for you.
the way that they've always had Faraday, and again, I use lots of books. Here's one of them. This is the DC Comics, uh, uh, 60 years of favorite comic book heroes. Good one to have. But I know a lot of you out there probably own this one though, which is the Encyclopedia of DC Comics. And I gotta say, if not for the DK people, There's a lot of knowledge out there that we have, and a lot of books that we have because DK just deemed it necessary because they've done the same thing with Marvel. But their thing for King Faraday here, man, I need glasses now. They give everything about the character, where he was born, his height, weight, everything, which I never really thought to have provided. But he is a native of Washington D.C. and he is a character who can. Yeah, that's not very good of me to do that. But basically, he is through and through, as it says, a secret agent. He's just someone that has lived long enough to have experience, the kind of experience that makes him very valuable and or dangerous, depending on what side you are on. But it's this particular. Wow, I am so bad. I'm so sorry, everybody.
That's okay.
This particular thing, though, isn't as extensive as it should be because of when it was written. You know, but I will say this: if you are a DC fan, and if you're making a pitch to say David Zaslav, what you want to do is try to pitch something that is kind of a combination of what you have with the DC universe and characters, and say Bond, Bourne, and John Wick. And if you could keep the budget down to like $70 million, you could do some amazing stuff with that. That's really what Shang-Chi should have been for the MCU. It shouldn't have been this big production that was made for $150-200 million. It should have been something closer to like 75 million, and done very bonding in, because of who he is and what his actual true personal mission is. And you could treat King Faraday the same way, where he's someone he's a man that has become a man of a certain age, and he's looking back now at the way the world is, that has changed in his lifetime from his point of view. You now have beings that can float above you and lift mountains and buildings and other things. You know, how that changes someone in their perspective, and probably in pushing him towards to actually do more good outside of where and who he's been working with up to this point. He knows where all the bodies are buried. He knows how to avoid getting too much attention, even from his former superiors, to do the right thing.
So what we have here, if I'm understanding this correctly, and I want to kind of play around with this concept a bit more, is we have a veteran spy who he's not disillusioned with the value of what he's supposed to do. He's kind of disillusioned with the people that are pointing people like him in certain directions that are antithetical to his country, to the relationships between countries throughout the world and the people. So you have something that's kind of rare, which is like, if you were to pitch this, imagine a retired James Bond who gets back in the game under his own auspices with a bunch of other sort of B-level superheroes or just really impressive agents fighting against certain entities that normally the government would never even entertain trying to stop because maybe they're in on it or maybe they're corrupt.
Guess what? We've already seen part of that story.
Yeah, and
that was part of the Avengers.
Yep.
That's what Hawkeye did. Except he was working, on behalf of Loki when he did it. But that's basically what happened. Hawkeye is that kind of character, and that's really, in my opinion, what the Hawkeye series should have at least partially covered. But they wanted to go and just focus.
They wanted to make him a family man.
Yeah, they wanted to make him a family man, and they wanted to focus mainly on Kate Bishop and try to usher, him out the door as quickly as possible. And that's unfortunate because you gave up a lot of really cool story possibilities with that character and with Kate Bishop with him. So that's part of the reason why Marvel's not doing as well as it should be. Again, they gave up trying to create the kinds of characters and stories that are more in line with what Marvel and Stan Lee started out doing, which is how Phase 1 started. You start down here, you go up here. And instead of going back down here, they are continuing to operate up here, and they're trying to build on top of what they did at the end of Endgame, and that it's not working because a lot of your big characters, a lot of these actors that played those characters are leaving now. So what they should have done was they should have come back down here, told more pretty much base level stories, and build up to the next great event.
Well, that comes
You
into
know.
the relationship between what we have with regards to the cinematic side of things and
Mm-hmm.
on in theaters versus stuff on the streaming shows. So
Mm-hmm.
what I mean, one of the theories that I always postulated was that your cinematic entries should be your big event films, your tent poles,
Mm-hmm.
your stuff that's beyond the budget of the television show. And the television show should be the intimate, character-driven stories that build towards those events. It's essentially like building a series of novels, like say like for Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. You have those first two that you've released. They are individual stories of their own that paint a picture towards a larger story, but it's all building up so that you have as many people interested in that final act as possible, which would be your theatrical release. But again, we are in a more entertainment accessible society than we were 20 years ago. So the model is now there. You subscribe to the streaming service, and they say, "Yep, we are building up a series of shows that come the first week of summer. It's going to all culminate in this Avengers film or this Justice League film that's going to be coming up this week. And after its long theatrical run of say a couple of months, it'll go on the streaming service, and then after that week of it on the streaming service, we go into now back to the individual series, which start a brand new story arc, which allow us to control our budgets. So for a character like King Faraday, he has from your description of him and from what we know of some of the few stories he's been in, he is kind of a great sort of linchpin to connect all of the other characters with various other stories.
Yes.
So you can have a sub story where he started this kind of independent organization. You can even have a threat where down the road Amanda Waller kind of re-recruits him to checkmate, and he decides to maybe I can influence things from within as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to doing from outside. Lots of fun potential there as well. And we have three kind of really solid through line adversaries for them, such as League of Shadows, Brother Blood, and the Cult of the Cobra. So from that area there, you have a nice potential for this type of character. So the next thing I'd have to ask is like, what are some of the love interests that we could explore with King Faraday that have been established in some of the books? Does he have a family? Is he tempted with a family, or is he willing to sort of sacrifice that part for the larger mission of just keeping the world stable enough so that they can pull themselves up from the bootstraps? You're muted at the moment.
There we go. First of all, thank you for that setup there. Uh, you know what? Yeah, he's had a few love interests. Although, to me, up to this point, you've had uh, oh man, oh man, there was his ex, who is the bodyguard for Bruce Wayne, whose name.
That was Sasha something, right?
That's it. I would start with her, but I wouldn't really make her the main love interest. I think, really, in this particular instance, you could have him end up with a lot of Bruce Wayne's exes, and there have been a lot of those. Um, uh, he is an interesting enough human that I think even Talia would be tempted by him a little bit. I'm sure she wouldn't, you know, decide to focus on him the way that she focuses on Bruce, but that's part of his talent. Again, this guy was a secret agent. He was good. Seduction is part of what he does. But because of his success and his instincts are in line closer to Bruce Wayne. I mean, I'm sorry, Batman's. I think he's even got more of a sixth sense about things, though, than even Bruce, because I think when Bruce gets distracted, it's easy to take him down sometimes. Uh, I think with I think with King Faraday, his entire life, both fortunately and unfortunately, is living this way. Having to grow that set of eyes in the back of his head. I
Hmm.
don't think he can ever truly have a family and be totally comfortable without suspecting something. I mean, think of it this way: to be someone that has lived so long and seen everything, it seems like he has seen whole families torn apart because of a lot of the not being able to be comfortable and know that the person that you're sitting opposite of, whether they are your spouse or even your very own kids or even your parents, and not thinking to yourself, is this person trying to betray me? This is Game of Thrones on a whole new level. And if you make it right as a HBO exclusive series, you could run for a couple of seasons like this if you really wanted to do it. What's the name of that one show that keeps getting all the Emmy nominations about the family who runs a communications empire? Um,
Is that the pirate radio or
no,
no?
no, that's
Um,
it's the one
oh, I
about.
know what you're talking about. The oh crap. I know everybody is a terrible, like they're terrible human beings in that show, but it's very engaging.
Yes, it's that show, and
Mhm.
and you could do it as a family of spies. Think of it that way. That would be horrible. I don't think I don't. I mean, and horrible in it for them, entertaining for us. I don't think Faraday could ever really submit himself to that easily.
Mhm.
Unless he were playing a role, playing the long game, trying to get to something. You know, um, I don't think I could ever see him like Jeff Bridges' character in The Old Man. I don't think he would ever allow himself to go completely off the grid. I mean, he could take some time out from everything, but I think he's done so much and seen so much, it's hard for him to truly let go. Because everywhere he goes, he knows all the bad guys in whatever country he's going to. It's like this person, this town is run by this person who's connected to this person who's connected to that. He can't let it go, and in that sense, he's cursed in a way. He can never truly let go because there's no place to go in his mind. He understands enough for it to be very bad for him that there's no place you can go without really walking into someone's front yard or backyard who's going to be doing some bad stuff.
Well, that seems like a great motivation with trying to clean it up. So, because
Mm-hmm.
again, what we're basically talking about is the fact that we have a very interesting character in King Faraday,
Mm-hmm.
who is a veteran, a veteran spy, who you could just inject one thing which would not be antithetical to his character, but actually a great dramatic point, which would be that maybe he does want to settle down and have a family, but where can he do that when he sees all these um, issues, these independent agencies, these cults, these criminal empires and whatnot? So they're all around him, and because of what he knows and what he's done, he's got that target on his back at all times. Could he really risk it? And the question being is like, oh, you have some good potential there, and then you throw a wrench into that where he meets the one person that he's willing to risk it all for, that he can absolutely trust, and then that comes into conflict. Well, what do you do at this point? It's kind of like your John Wick moment, which is like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to protect this dog, you know,
Pretty
and it's
much.
and it's like I found a town. This is a guy who it's maybe run by the mob or something of that nature, and he's basically on the mission. It's like I'm going to take him out so that I can live peacefully and in secret with this new person in this new work in this new town, and hopefully people will leave me alone so I can grow old and die, and no one will be after me or my family, and I can trust this one person. That's a great idea for a potential show. And then we have the other part too, which is this could be a byproduct of him doing his own sort of thing, where he's retired from whatever spy agency he's affiliated with from the United States,
Mm-hmm.
but he's getting recruited privately by maybe Ted Cord, maybe Oliver Queen, maybe Bruce Wayne, basically saying, "Listen, I've got stuff is going on. I've followed some evidence that leads to this part in this country that you're very familiar with. I will provide you with some money, equipment. You provide a team, you go over, you do that. Maybe that gets on the radar of Amanda Waller, who's like, listen, we just started up Checkmate. You're already kind of doing what we're doing, and it's kind of throwing a wrench to our own plans. But maybe we can reconcile that together and combine our forces. Then you have a Checkmate sub story where Faraday sees that Checkmate is just as corrupt as all the things he's been fighting. And then you can have them at odds together, and then you throw in a story with the League of Shadows, you throw in a story with Brother Blood, you throw in a story with Cult of Cobra. You've got potentially a nice 5-season, 10 to 12 episodes, hour-long story arc there with a lot
Mm-hmm.
of characters you can play around with in this franchise. So
And
it's
then,
really it's fascinating that Detective Comics and some of the characters that they have that they would consider throwaways at this point, and with the current management, do
yes,
have a potential to really create a nice stable foundation for the infrastructure of what the Detective Comics universe has.
yes, and again, you have you if you want to end the show, you have the ultimate bad guy for him to eventually either become aware of or whatever, and that's Vandal Savage. I mean, you have a nice way to go out
Hmm.
if that's really what he wants to do. If he decides, you know what, there's no place I can go where I'm ever really gonna truly feel that I can just relax. So if I'm gonna, this is gonna be my life, I'm gonna take on the ultimate bad guy.
And
And
throw a wrench in his gears and see how
yeah,
long that he can do with that. Yeah, so that's pretty fun because, again, through this conversation, it's been at a little bit over an hour. We've talked a lot about the character and the potential, but really, we're only really scraping the surface, because what we're kind of finding in this discussion is, even with you take a look at a lot of his appearances with Danger Trail, with various Justice League things, Checkmate, Batman issues, Green Lantern issues, and so forth, he's very underused and very underdefined. So there's a lot of potential there that you can explore without actually contradicting some of the moral code of the character. So this is actually a very viable character
mm-hmm,
for a studio to use, in a way where you don't have you have more permission to experiment with him without actually ruining people that actually love the character, because there's, in comparison to a lot of the other characters, like we have way more on Amanda Waller than we have on King Faraday, and that's just within the last 30 years.
mm-hmm.
We have way more on Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, and a whole bunch of other D-list characters, Booster Gold, Ted Cord, whatnot, than King Faraday. But you also have the fact that King Faraday comes from the world of spies, and there's all these other characters that you can associate with, and a whole nother subgenre for DC films and or DC entertainment in general to explore. So you don't just have like a series of him as a veteran spy. You could have a series of him as a junior spy, just learning the ways of the game right before that first superhero exists.
Mm-hmm.
You have a potential where he's in, the prime of his life, where he can't believe he's lived this long, and he's kind of come to terms with that. And then you have that's the turning point where the superheroes come in, and it's like, we need a guy with your experience to try, sort of kind of come up with some game plans of how do we deal with this guy that flies, that's an alien from another planet. How do we deal with the guy with a magic ring? How do we deal with the dude that can run the speed of light? And how do we deal with the guy that is operating out of Gotham, hides in the shadows, and we can never seem to locate? Like, how is he always one step ahead of us?
Well, and who seemingly is probably the least superpowered. It has no power, and yet does things that are almost supernatural in the way that he's able to accomplish things. Yeah, I
Yeah,
it,
you have a great potential there. And what was the initial agency you said it was the CBI, was it? Or
yes. I think it was in Central, not Central Intelligence. It was oh man, what was the name of that? It was
I just remember the initials, I'm sorry.
ICA. It was ah man, this is what getting old will do to me. I was so much better when I was younger. Um,
It was a reflexive back in the day. See, there's another thing you can have with Faraday in his older age, is like where a lot of his knowledge was reflexive when he was younger, and now he's got to push a little harder to get it, but the
yeah,
skills are still there.
but I'm telling you, anyone that decides to just invest in this and to take the time to go through this, you're going to be rewarded in ways, especially if you're even a little bit of a DC fan. You can have all kinds of heroes and stuff just make cameo appearances. You don't even have to have really costumed heroes. You
Hmm.
could have King Faraday's the type of character who could visit a lot of people in their quote unquote real life because he knows where they live. He knows who they are. He's not willing to. His whole thing is that he's beginning to see how everything really plays out. He's beginning to gain a knowledge of how the world really works. So it really benefits him that anyone who potentially could become useful in the future, he doesn't want to blow who they are.
Hmm.
He knows Dick Grayson. Dick Grayson is your key to the upper echelons of heroes that you have. Why would you want to blow that? So you know who he is. He wants your help. He wants to talk to you for a while. You give him some advice. You know, you kind of goose him a little bit towards your side of things. You continue to check to see if he'd be open to wanting to spend some time being in the clandestine services, and he'll continue to say no until the one day he says yes.
So here now we have the final part of the struggle, which is like we played around some concepts that DC could explore, which would be really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Now we'll go back to what Patty Pucks, who's in the chat right now. He said, "Remember the Human Target TV show with Mark
Yes.
Valley,
Yes.
which I thought was a very good show, but we was missing one aspect, which is it was very isolated from Detective Comics. So that's one of the things you have to be kind of mindful of, especially for a studio like Warner Brothers, is how do you make sure that you're doing this and that it's fitting within the greater pantheon of Detective Comics and DC films, because those types of stories um, need to be.
Central Bureau of Intelligence. Thank you, Das
Central Bureau
Wolf.
of Intelligence. Okay, Das Wolfen, thank you, sir. Um, so how do you make sure that you can cross that genre over? Because the way that they did the Human Target TV show, which I thought was very effective, like the first 6 or 7 episodes were really catching, and I liked the entire dynamic going on
Mm-hmm.
with it. But again, it's based off of a comic, and you would never know it was based off of a comic, especially under a DC brand. So how now, even though there's a lot of things that were very successful with that show, its execution, its dialogue, its character portrayal, how can we make sure that we match a quality of that as a baseline and then exceed it so that it feels like it's a very fluid and strongly connected show to or film property to the rest of the DC universe? What are some of the aspects that you would say would be the best hook to associate your average audience member that likes Detective Comics, knows about the superhero stuff, but doesn't know about the spy genre or the Western genre or so forth of Detective Comics? What would you say is the best kind of maybe adversary, villain, or character to bridge over that? That would also probably, I guess, be budget conscious because that's
Yeah.
the other thing you have to remember with the studios.
Intergang.
Intergang. Oh,
Intergang.
nice.
I would because that's your tie into Lex Luthor. That is his kind of
And Bruno Mannheim and all those guys.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
all the major industrial bad guys, corporate bad guys. If you were to have a tie into that, that'd be great. I mean, originally I would say Star Labs, but that's been used so many times. I mean, if you could get away with being able to use it legally, I'd say Star Labs. But outside of that, Intergang, and uh, I would make it so that it would be an Intergang franchise in a particular city that's not known for having Intergang yet, and I would bring in not so much the costume version of a lot of heroes. I would have again their actual regular personas. Instead of Bumblebee, I'd have Karen Beecher
Hmm.
be a cameo appearance that you would have. Someone who's smart, young, beautiful, uh, uh, and someone who can offer a little bit of assistance where necessary. You give hints of, but not quite do full character breakout hero moments.
Hmm.
You keep it kind of like the kind of like the Bourne films, and somewhere between Bourne and the current version of Mission Impossible films. That way you could keep that tension going, you know, and when necessary, you have your John Wick moments. But for the most part, if you keep that balance there and have a lot of cameo appearances, uh, say like Gar, uh, 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 both versions of Gar, I mean both heroes named Gar, meaning Aqualad and Changeling.
Or Beast Boy,
Uh,
yeah, Beast Boy Changeling, yeah.
if you have their more regular personas, yeah, it'd be great. It would work out fantastically. That way, you first of all you keep your budgets low. That's the important thing. There is no need to overspend on any of this. This almost writes itself if you do it the right way. And if you go against Intergang, and in this case you see how Intergang comes into a particular area, how it's almost like a bad guy kind of franchising type thing, because that's the way Lex Luthor would do it, you know.
Would this be an intergang that's connected with Apocalypse, or prior to his connection with Apocalypse?
prior
Like,
prior
prior. Okay,
because
yeah.
because you don't want to overpower Intergang. You don't want to make them just like, we can do things and we can take a, you don't want to do that. I would rather have Intergang be pre Apocalypse affiliation, so it really is all just Lex Luthor providing franchise bad guys to different areas.
And all under the guise of him manipulating certain markets for Lex Luthor and Luthor Corp to take advantage of. So essentially, he's creating it'd be fun because he's creating an intergang that will gain the attention of Apocalypse in the future, and then you have a bridge in that regards, where intergang kind of separates themselves from Luthor's control. And yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
But
So yeah, that's fantastic. Now, Darius in the chat, he mentioned the Question as a possible agent to work with Faraday. I think that would be an interesting idea.
oh yes, well, all
Um,
of them. Look. When here's the thing. I know what Christopher
Chance.
Christopher Christopher
Is it Christopher Chance, the human target, or
no,
different
Chris
Christopher?
Nolan.
Chris
Chris
Nolan.
Nolan.
Okay.
I know what Chris Nolan said, that there were no superpowered people in the Dark Knight films. There was one, but he was only in his regular persona. He never really, you know, and that's the Creeper, Jack Ryder.
Yep.
You know, which is another example. See, that's how I would use. That's how I would do that. In fact, Jack Ryder is the only character who a lot of people didn't recognize actually connects uh, the Flash television show to, in a sense, he's in both the Flash television series and he's in the Dark Knight films. And um, that's a good character to have. And a good way to have that character in there. He didn't need to become the Creeper. He's just in both those. That's how I would do a lot of that. You don't need to have the Question in it, although the Question, in my opinion, is also one of those characters that could easily have a movie done. The way that they did Joker is the way that I would do a Question film. Because he's the ultimate, again, like Joker, the way they portrayed him, in my opinion, the Question is one of those borderline characters. Half the things he says is probably stuff he made up in his own crazy head anyway. So, but it gets results, you know. So, I would do that. I would have lots of different characters. I just wouldn't have them reveal themselves because there's no reason to. And if you're a big DC Comics fan, you're going to recognize a lot of these characters. Heck, I'd even be crazy enough to put Sugar and Spike in there somewhere. You know, that's the kind of call out, shout out that I think can be done in a way without being disruptive and a little bit of eye rolling by those who aren't really, quote unquote, in on the joke. But if you make them interesting enough, it would cause someone to go out and want to find out about said character, and then they realize, oh, that's basically a living Easter egg.
Yeah, and more Easter eggs they could throw in there would be Daily Planet being the main newspaper. You could throw in Faraday's like Lois Lane stumbled onto this mission that we're looking on. We got to one make sure that she doesn't ruin it for us, and two get the mission done as soon as possible because now the clock is ticking. And it would be such a very passive um, mention of it, but also keeping things within the universe without it being completely divorced, which again has been a mistake that Warner Brothers and Detective Comics have been doing with their live action adaptations for quite a while. And Keith has frozen. Okay, so while we're getting that sort of sorted out, oh, there you go. Now you're back.
Hey, I was wondering what happened. Oh wow, was that me? Was that?
Yeah, it was just a quick freeze, but that's okay. We are back, and I think it's about time we start doing a little bit of a wrap up on
Okay.
this. So well, we've got the potential of a character like King Faraday, and the way that he can access the majority of the DC characters through
Mm-hmm.
his spies. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of potential here for this character. Um, for as long as he's been around, he appears to have such a kind of like a weak foundation compared to a lot of the other characters that have been around as long as him.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a very tempting type of character to explore with a lot of potentiality for all sorts of stories, and keeping it on more of the spy side of things, the covert nature of things, the 4D chess sort of things, and lots of potential. We've gone over Intergang, we've gone over Checkmate, we've gone over League of Shadows, Brother Blood, Cult of Cobra,
Task
right?
Force X.
Task Force X. So that's six adversaries, 6 seasons worth of spy games
Mm-hmm.
you could actually play off of for a potentially great show with a lot of different characters to explore in that realm. So it'd be very fantastic to see someone actually, you know, take the ball of that type of character and run with it.
Again, it, I think one of the reasons why we're doing this today, one of the reasons why I think you invited me here, is me constantly saying that there is a this incredible vault of characters that DC Comics has that they barely scratch the surface of. And if you step outside of the superhero realm, it's easier to see a lot more of these characters that are spies or detectives, cops, Western heroes. Heck, they have an entire World War II section that if you wanted to do the entire World War II from the beginning of the war to the end of the war, there's all these different characters that you could have there within that realm, within that universe, starting with Sergeant Rock. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it they have it. They've got it. They just need to use it. Because I'm telling you right now, the way that the MCU and DC and potentially DC Studios are running, they're only running based on their superhero characters. And they both have more than just that. And I at least have to say, we've already seen what the MCU is doing about that. They're taking a lot of their non superhero characters and turning them into superheroes. And that's why Black Widow, part of the reason why Black Widow didn't work. That's why for me Shang-Chi really didn't work. You're taking all of these characters and you're just basically making them overpowered heroes because you're trying to explain, well, you're trying to basically say, well, there's no reason why regular people, normal people, can be a part of all of this, when in actuality that was really your big joke, your big in on a movie like the Avengers. The fact that Hawkeye and Black Widow weren't people with power. You're completely going the opposite direction, and I think inherently and instinctively a lot of people know it.
Basically, it's plucking them out of their more comfortable space where they could have the more versatile story on a smaller level and putting them into the larger tentpole type of fields. I thought that was kind of an issue with regards to Black Widow. The climax is taking down this floating fortress. Um, Seems a little beyond the individual, especially
Well,
as human spy at this point, at least in this way, where it's like Black Widow isn't using her resources with, say, Shield to take
mhm.
down this flying fortress, a la James Bond to Blofeld's secret volcano lair. That would have been more plausible because she's at least leading the way, or she's located the target, and now the cavalry comes in. And what we
Yeah.
end up seeing is basically it's her and her sister with her pseudo father taking out this flying fortress on her own, doing superhuman feats that would be great for a superpowered person, but seems a little bit unplausible for a normal human person. It's crossing the boundaries, because I would love to see Black Widow do some amazing stunts and amazing aerial work and whatnot, just not under the difficulties that we as an audience would say she should be dead in
But
this.
that's the thing. The last time we saw Black Widow prior to the Avengers was in Iron Man 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So now her first appearance in Avengers is her being tortured. And in a situation that if she had superpowers, she wouldn't be fearing basically being kicked off and, her chair with her tied to it falling to her death. She'd be able to survive that. She'd be able to bust the ropes and kick all three guys' butts. Um, there should always be tension with that character because she is a spy. More than anything else, she is a spy. She doesn't need superpowers. She's really good at what she does. And so is Hawkeye. And I just felt that both characters have been completely mistreated within the MCU in Phase 4. Uh,
So now we
uh,
have a good baseline of what not to do for a King Faraday type of situation, which is don't exceed the limits of his skills, for the sake of the wow factor, but really be more inventive with his skills to achieve a wow factor.
you don't
So
need to be spending $200 million on a Black Widow movie. You need
no,
to spend whatever you spent for the very first Bourne film, or whatever you would spend for. Really, Black Widow should have been comparable to John Wick. That should have been that film, and we didn't get it. What we got was not very good superhero movie with a person who's not a superpowered hero.
well, we
So
have a character that's basically predicated on espionage,
yes,
and we didn't get much espionage.
no,
we
we
got it
didn't.
was essentially espionage, and it was assassins over espionage.
Yeah, and it's like, and then the one thing that you set up with that character, it's like I want this one thing, and then when they find out or get a clue going towards that one thing, they drop it. I mean, literally, they have her just drop it. She just doesn't care anymore, and it makes no sense. She wants to know about her family. She finds out a major clue about her family, and the fact that she still has family members alive, she's dropping it. Just, I don't want to do that. And that's the writers giving up. That's low to no talent right there. That's dumb, is what that is. So, Marvel, guys are killing me. You're killing me.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to end off today's discussion. Um,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on us this morning, talking about King Faraday and all the connections that he has within Detective Comics and the parallels with Marvel. We will do this again when schedules allow for it,
Yeah.
for another character. But thank you so much for everyone in the chat who has been watching us so far. Thanks for anyone in the future watching us now. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. We will address them on the next episode that we do of Keith Opines. Thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out with us this Saturday morning, and
Thank you.
we'll see you all next time. Bye bye.